2L of the Defamation Act 2009, you are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. And members should also be aware that under the salient rulings of the Chair, members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official by name in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Mr. O'Connell, could you make your opening statement, please? Thank you very much.
We must thank you, Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to present before you this afternoon. As you have said, I am on Oireachtas PRO of Immigration Control Platform and I am accompanied by my colleague from the Executive Committee, Ted Neville. I should perhaps just say that Immigration Control Platform was founded in January 1998, an NGO working in this area, seeking strict immigration controls and not an excessive level of immigration. We would like to begin by reminding the committee that the two most fundamental duties of the state are the maintenance of law and order and the defence of the borders of the state. In today's Europe, that defence of the borders of the state is no longer against military attack, but against illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is the modern form of invasion. This is readily seen when one sees images of boats heading like an armada across the Mediterranean, but it is no less invasion when it is the more clandestine type of illegal immigration experienced in Ireland. There are many different types. It may be so-called students whose intention was to abuse the system to gain access to the labour market. It may be people issued with deportation orders who went on the run, and many other categories. In all cases, these are people who are effectively giving two fingers to the state and its citizens and saying, no, you won't decide who comes to live here and what limits there will be. We will decide, not you. The state is not an abstraction. It is us collectively. The defiance of the state, which is illegal immigration, is an offence committed against the citizens of Ireland. To quote a former Secretary-General of the Department of Justice, it is the absolute right and bounden duty of every sovereign state to control its borders in the interests of its citizens. We would particularly emphasise the phrase bounden duty. We hear of the right of states to control their borders, but we never hear of the duty of the state to do so, and in the interests of its citizens. Dealing with illegal immigration is part of that defence of the borders, and it is not done by saying, it's okay, you can stay. Ireland now has one of the higher levels of immigrants per head of population in the EU, as shown by recent Eurostat figures. But the authorities, and particularly politicians, have not woken up to the fact. The level of deportations of illegals is risible, mere tokenism. In 2014, we deported 111, including failed asylum seekers and illegals. We don't have a breakdown. And there were 237 voluntary returns, a grand total of 348. In contrast, the following figures come from the Migration Observatory at Oxford. In 2013, 50,741 people were removed from the UK or departed voluntarily after the initiation of removal. This figure excludes individuals refused entry at port and subsequently removed in order to focus more clearly on what most people understand by deportation. The UK's population is about 14 times that of Ireland. A proportionate level of deportation from Ireland would give a deportation figure of 3,624, more than 10 times the actual figure. If we have your permission, Chairman, my colleague might deal with the fiscal elements. Is that okay?
With which?
With the fiscal elements that continue.
Fine, yeah, sure.
Okay. In their presentation to the committee on February 25th, the Migration Rights Centre of Ireland claimed that their proposed scheme of regularisation would result in a fiscal gain to the state of €185 million over a 5-year period, or €37 million per annum. They failed to take account, however, of the fact that each illegal immigrant in a job displaces an Irish citizen or a legal immigrant who should be in that job. If we take even the lowest estimate of the MRCI figure, that gives us a figure of 17,400 illegals in jobs which should be held by people who, instead, are on job seekers' allowance. The cost of the state of job seekers' allowance for that number of people is over €170 million per annum. Rounding the figures for clarity, job seekers' allowance is just under €10,000 per annum. By 17,000 gives that figure of €170 million per annum. To put it another way, deporting an illegal immigrant, at the most recent figures we have, costs about €3,500. In light of the figures we have given above, the €3,500 would be recouped from a mere 4 months or so of savings of job seekers' allowance for persons who are consigned to that situation. In our view, these figures show the massive monetary harm done to Irish workers and to the state by illegal immigrants. The committee might be interested in the text of an email received by the Immigration Control Platform on October 31st of 2014. It reads, and I quote, in short, "Dear Sir or Madam, where is the best place to report illegal immigrants who work in Ireland? My wife is about to lose her job to an undocumented Chinese girl. I must stress that my wife is also Chinese, but is married to myself, an Irish national, and she has worked here paying tax for the last 10 years. She is being let go as she is here legally." End of quote. We, that is ICP, have not even touched on the further harm which is caused by the downward pressure on wages caused by the employment of illegal immigrants. The Department of Justice has worked very reasonably with the Migrant Rights Council of Ireland, as they have admitted, that's the MRCI, in dealing with people who were no longer legally present through no fault of their own, when they had perhaps been assured by their employers that their work permit had been renewed and then found that it had not. A scheme was set up to help such people, the reactivation scheme, administered by the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation. We have no objection to such a scheme because there is no brazen defiance of the laws of the state involved. Point 9. This reasonableness has been a hallmark of the authorities when Dermot Ahern introduced belated reforms to deal with student visa abuse. One of them was that a 7-year maximum on the length of time one could be on a student visa. This was introduced with great consideration during the transitional period. For example, if someone was halfway through a course, they were allowed to finish it. That consideration was acceptable. What was not acceptable was what Minister Shatter did under the 2004 Student Probationary Extension Scheme, where he gave an effective amnesty to 2,661 students who had exceeded the 7-year maximum, plus an unknown number of spouses and children involved. Those 2,661 were told, quote, "You may stay and work in Ireland forever," keeping 2,661 Irish or legal immigrants on job seekers' allowance. Point 10. We want to see no more of that injustice done to our citizens by an amnesty for illegals, and no amount of dressing up a scheme with criteria will change it from being effectively an amnesty. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, that's it. Okay, then, Deputy McGrath, you've indicated you have a question.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to welcome Anya and Ted to the Oireachtas Committee on Justice. And maybe my first question, very short, is in relation to your organisation, the National Platform. You were set up in 1998, is that right?
Yes, but
and
that is
how many members have you got?
Chair, please,
yeah. Sorry, Chair. The first question is, how many members have you got now?
May I first say that the Deputy did not get the name of our organisation correct. It is Immigration Control Platform. Okay. It has been our practice to treat the matter the Deputy has raised as the number of our members as an internal matter. We have never given an answer to journalists, and we will not allow them now to get it in directly. I particularly make that point because it would be of some relevance indeed if there were several NGOs like ourselves working on this side of the debate, a very contested matter all over Europe. It appears to be the case in this country that there is no other organisation except our own working on this side of the debate. There are somewhere around 200, it has been said, working on the other side of the debate. So if there were other organisations besides us, it would indeed be a matter for the committee to know which of us was the biggest one. But since we are the only one, and since all surveys and polls in Ireland show between 60 and 65% of the population saying we do want controls, we don't want immigration to go too far, we consider that we have a valid voice to represent that type of opinion without dealing with the internal affairs of our organisation.
Okay, next question, Deputy McGrath.
Secondly, just Anya mentions the word controls, and then in your oral submission you use very emotive language like armada, abuse the system, 2 fingers to the system. I'd like you to respond to, when you're using this kind of emotive language in relation to the issue of immigration and our own history, how do you respond when we have thousands of Irish people leaving our shores every year, emigrating to other countries, and also because of our history of, in many countries, illegal immigration?
Mr. Connell, Firstly, when one says emotive language, it simply means one has a different viewpoint and doesn't like it. In the business of us having a history of immigration, I suppose the answer is, so what? It is our business to run the country as we have it in the interests of our citizens. I would say to you that I was once on holiday in Norway, not that many years ago, and our guide was a well-educated man, a third-level lecturer. I raised this mantra with him, this thing one hears in Ireland about our history of emigration, and Norway would be the other country in Europe closest to ourselves in having a very strong history of emigration. And when I said to him that you hear this thing in Ireland, you know, we had a big history of emigration, now it's our turn to let people in. I said, is this said in Norway? And he could not believe what I was saying. It is not something you hear in any other country. Germany, and it's a thing people, particularly in Ireland, generally don't seem to know much about. Germany, between 1850 and 1900, supplied never less than a quarter of all the emigrants to the United States. It's a country that somehow people don't seem to associate with immigration. No way, if you said to the Germans, you supplied a quarter of America's immigrants between 1850 and 1900, now it's your turn, they would laugh at you.
Next question, Deputy McGrath.
Third and final question is, well, I suppose I don't know whether they laugh at you or not, but it's the hypocrisy of the argument I find from your point of view. I think that if you have a country, we'll say, with their own history that has many immigrants and we campaign for the illegal Irish in America, we across party groups in this stall, I would find your position on the issue hypocritical, and that's why we challenge it. And final thing I'd say is that it's very important as well. Isn't it just a fact of life that immigration, it's a reality, whether it's an economic issue or a social issue or a human rights issue. It's just a fact of life, of modern life. And should we not just get on with
it? May I allow my colleague?
Of course.
And I might add when he is finished.
Mr. Neville.
Yeah, briefly, thank you, Chairman, and Deputy McGrath. The hypocrisy, if there is hypocrisy, I think is wholly and solely on the legislature and the government of this country in pleading in America on one hand for illegal Irish and putting that position against our situation in Ireland. Undoubtedly, it is a failure of the Irish state through many generations that it has not been able to productively employ its people in its own country, and that is a great shame. But there isn't a quid pro quo that because we went abroad to America, as many other countries did as a nation of immigrants, that we are then bound to accept limitless quantities of people from the continent of Africa or sub-Saharan Africa or Asia or wherever else. Jurisdiction for controlling immigration in the United States is properly the matter for the United States government. And I don't see it, perhaps as you're implying, to some extent in terms of a population swap, because America took our people, therefore we should take Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa as a quid pro quo. It certainly has been a poor feature of the Irish state since its foundation that it has not been able to find a productive employment for its own citizens. It's a great failure. And what I do lament is that during the illusory boom that we had around the turn of the century, that at a time when there were many illegal Irish in the States at that point, that we as a government and a state did not actively seek and publicise that we wished those people to return to this country where they can be legal. Instead, employers driven by all kinds of agendas were much happier to bring in foreign people who could be employed very willingly at possibly lower rates of pay and so forth and all the rest of it. Our duty in our boom, which is gone, was to bring our expatriated people home to work productively in their own country. We didn't do that. And it is rather lamentable that we now have to go cap in hand with bowls of shamrock every Patrick's Day around the world. Will you take our Irish from us and keep them? We should want them here. That's what we should have done. We didn't do it. But I don't see a quid pro quo as a population swap between that situation and us taking people from all over the world without limit and without input.
Okay, thank you.
Could I add to that, Chairman?
Okay, thank you.
The Americans have absolutely no interest in whether we legalise Pakistanis, Nigerians or Chinese. Obviously, the reciprocity there would be if they legalised our illegal immigrants, we would obviously have to legalise, and I know it would be a small number, their illegal immigrants. I would like to take up this idea of that one hears about the hypocrisy of the government. Quite frankly, it is rather infantile to accuse the government of hypocrisy in the sense that it is surely rather puerile to expect that, ridiculous to expect that a government will...
Accuse the government of hypocrisy. Accuse your group of hypocrisy. No, apology. No,
it's important to correct it. Get your chance. Just let the lady finish, please. Thank you. Sorry, please. Thank you.
Well, since we are certainly, since we, Chairman, are single issue and don't get involved in, as my colleague said, immigration to America, legal or otherwise, we can't be accused of hypocrisy. But I'm just saying that you frequently hear that the government is accused of hypocrisy for seeking an amnesty for our illegals and not giving them here. And what I was saying is that it is a very silly notion that any government would simply put its citizens only on the same basis as citizens from all over the world. If you stood for election and said, by the way, I don't care any more for Irish citizens than I care for the citizens of China or Pakistan, you wouldn't get elected. It is normal and natural and expected, I think, of governments that they will root for their own citizens and that they will have, if you like, the brass neck to look for special concessions for them. Hypocritical it may be, but is what every government everywhere will do.
Okay. Deputy Mac.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speechless. Through the Chair, I don't have three questions. I have plenty of comments. I don't have three questions.
Questions is what we need, not comments.
Yeah, okay. Through the Chair, you said about the duty to bring home our Irish to work. My question to both of you is, have either of you ever, or do you know anybody, or has anyone in your family ever emigrated during a recession in this country for work? Before I finish, Chair, I have to say I find the tone of the opening statement absolutely atrocious. Calling people illegals and all of those terms that you use, it just sounds terrible. These are human beings, these are people. And I think the whole tone is obnoxious, and I have no problem saying it through the Chair. And I'd love if you could answer the question as to whether either of you have friends, family or anybody that you know that have ever had to emigrate for work. Through the Chair, thank you.
I have not the slightest intention of speaking about my personal or family relationships and shouldn't be asked about them. I would like to take up the point that Deputy McFadden made about how terrible it is to call people illegals. We have the authority of the Irish statute book behind us in this. There is on our statute book a law which is the Illegal Immigrants Trafficking Act 2000. The statute book, by the way, does not recognise that the other terminology, illegal immigrants, is the proper terminology. I hope I've answered Deputy McFadden.
Okay. I believe that they're human beings, they're not illegals.
Do you really think that we can...
Sorry.
Chair, I beg pardon.
Please. Okay. All done? Oh. Deputy, all done? Okay.
I'm all done. I have
Deputy
to be.
Ferris, you want next to indicate?
I would like to ask Inini Corneal and Mr Neville, through the Chair, if they are Irish citizens.
Yes, Deputy Ferris.
Yeah, and my second question is, do you consider yourself Christians?
Second question.
And my answer to that is that my religious position is entirely private to me.
And third question.
It's just something I want to say, Chairman. 2 weeks ago, this day 2 weeks ago, I was in Poland and I visited Auschwitz. And I certainly feel that there is a common thread between reading this statement and what I heard and learned in Auschwitz. Thank you.
Chairman, that is outrageous.
Again, I have to actually ask you.
I find, and I think another member has said that they find that your statement is, Chairman, is outrageous.
No, I think you have to actually withdraw that kind of a comment, Deputy.
I insist on its withdrawal, Chairman.
In all fairness, I think you really do. You know.
Has it been withdrawn, Chairman? Has it been withdrawn?
Yeah, I think you should really. You know. That's.
Well, Chairman, I will withdraw it, but what I will say is that there are people in this country we have met, certainly have met a lot of them here that are called illegals by this organisation, amongst other things, and reading between the lines. I regretfully withdraw it because you asked me to do so, but that's the way I feel.
Statement withdrawn. Statement withdrawn. Deputy McLaughlin.
I think it's important to be honest. If you put on through the chair, if you were to follow the report of this debate on the journal.ie this evening, the majority of the comments will be in support of the two speakers. Let's be honest about that. If we talk about asylum seekers and the direct provision centre system, the majority of comments on the journal.ie will be opposed to the asylum seekers and support of those who would ask them to be deported. So we have a major issue in Ireland that we need to be honest about, and the truth of it is that the two contributors today actually speak for a large view that's held privately in Ireland today. So let's be honest about that from the outset. Now, here's my point. Ireland is the only country in the world that today has a population lower than it did in the early 1800s. Okay? Since the foundation of the state, this state, in the early 1920s, through to a period, a book was written in 1987 by a man called Raymond Crotty. It was called Ireland in Crisis. And in that book, Raymond Crotty identified that of all the children who had survived childhood from the foundation of the state, half had emigrated. And then, of course, we had the 80s, and then we have the emigration. I'm a Donegal man, so I know all about emigration. My father, my grandfather, and I had to emigrate, not as asylum seekers, but for economic reasons. So I put this to you. How, having stated those two through the chairman, but obviously directed to the two contributors, how, with that knowledge of our history of economic migrants across the world, can we say that we will not accept asylum seekers to Ireland? And how can we not have a position that would regularise, not have an open door policy, but would regularise those who have been living here in Ireland for long periods of time? What I understand right now, just to wrap up, Chairman, of policy, is not that Ireland would open their door for all to come, as has been the case for the Irish people through the ages, but that we would regularise those who have lived here for 3 or 4 years or more, and allow them to continue their lives here and return to their families. You may have seen the testimony of a man from the Philippines, which was deeply moving here, and indeed we're deeply moved for our Irish citizens who give similar testimony over in the United States. So I put that to you, leaving aside ideological perspectives. We're all decent human beings here. How can we, as an Irish people with that history, allow a situation where we would not regularise that or allow genuine asylum seekers to stay in the state? So I'll put those questions to you.
Okay, Ms. Nicholas.
Through the chair.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Could I first take up the point, and from my experience, the Deputy is correct when he says that probably this evening or today that the comments on journal.ie will be contrary to our views. I will say to him that from my equal experience...
No.
In agreement. I beg your pardon. Oh, that the journal.ie will be in agreement.
No. I'll clarify. I better clarify this. If you follow...
One moment, please. Can we have a bit of order, please? One voice, one meeting. If people want to have private conversations, please tap outside the door.
Through the chair, it's important to clarify. When this debate is reported on the journal.ie this evening, and in relation to previous debates on this subject matter, I am saying that the majority of the comments will be in support of your view. So we have to be honest that your view is not some view on the fringes in Irish society. Large numbers of Irish people share your perspective. So that's the basis on which I put my questions to you.
Can you respond, Ms. Nicholas?
Could I say that in relation to the Deputy's mention of asylum seekers, I'm entirely puzzled because asylum seekers are not on this afternoon's agenda. They're a very separate issue. We would be delighted to be before the committee if they invited us and speak about that issue, although there's one thing I'll say in a moment, but they are not at all the subject of this afternoon's proceedings. With respect, I think when you talked about our history, I thought we had already answered that particular point adequately. I am astonished in a way to hear, I'm pleased to hear, but I'm astonished to hear the Deputy say that it isn't the case that he wants an open door for all to come, because I have in front of me motions passed at the Sinn Féin Ordais in April 1998, and motion 26, which was passed unanimously, I think, contains the following wording: Sinn Féin will work for the achievement of the optimum position of no restriction on immigration into Ireland. And motion 27 said Sinn Féin deplores all attempts to limit the numbers of political and economic refugees into the country. The optimum position of no restriction on immigration into Ireland. Perhaps the Deputy's party has changed its policy. I wasn't aware that it had.
One meeting, please.
Can I just put the question again?
One meeting, please.
Can I just put the question again? You obviously haven't listened to my questions. So the first point was around the journal.ie. I've clarified that for you. Now, in terms of this question, what I said is, in terms of government policy being proposed or suggested, or policies that I've heard suggested, they are not proposing an open door approach. Okay? What is being proposed is the regularisation of migrants, economic migrants who are in this country longer than 3 years. That's the proposals. So it wasn't about Sinn Féin's policy. It was about what's being proposed, as I understand it, for changes to legislation and suggested by groups who work out there. So that's the question to clarify. I still have two questions left.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I think we have made it very clear, both from the point of view of first principles and also for fiscal reasons, which I see nobody has mentioned, that we absolutely oppose regularisation, and the committee has before it a supplementary sheet there which gives what is in fact the government response every time that regularisation is mentioned, and that is that there is an agreement at EU level that the Member States agreed to the European Pact on Immigration and Asylum at the European Council in October 2008 and made specific commitments to use only case-by-case regularisation rather than generalised regularisation under national law. It is considered problematic to do otherwise. One of the ways of dealing with illegal immigration, particularly in not having it go further, is to make it very clear this jurisdiction will not be granting amnesties. It isn't that if you granted regularisation that tomorrow that you'd have somebody, in Africa or Asia saying, "Oh, the Irish have granted regularisation, let's head off." Rather, it is that in the medium to long term, the message goes out from European countries, has gone from them, and we don't want to be among the number sending that message. Become an illegal immigrant, stick around for long enough, manage to stay under the radar, and you will wear them down. They will blink first, because that's what this is about. They know that you'll turn around in this sort of situation and say, "Oh, look, we really must let them stay." They know that they will wear you down. You'll blink first.
Second question, Deputy Blackman, for the Chair, please.
Okay, whenever the Migrant Rights Centre were before us, they produced evidence that if we were to regularise, I think it's around 20,000 migrants who have lived here for over 3 years, that would actually be an economic net benefit for our state. Now, internationally, there is all types of empirical evidence that if you are to regularise the status of migrants who have been here contributing to our economy for quite a long time, that it is actually a net economic benefit for the state involved. Have you any evidence to the contrary?
Well, I think we gave the evidence in our statement and in our submission. I thought it was quite clear. I find it very strange that I understand where they're coming from, one sense, but when the MRCI talk about tax, it seems to me to be a red herring, because by their own admission, almost all of these people, 87%, are working. They said themselves that half of them had paid tax, and it is, I would imagine, a lot of them, again, as they admitted, are in at minimum wage level, which I'm not too familiar with these. If you're a minimum wage, will you actually be in the tax net at all? It would appear that 30%, is it, Mr. Neville, or something like that, in our country of workers don't pay any tax at all. They already must be paying tax. They have, sorry, many of them, as was admitted by the MRCI, they have PPS numbers. There is no difficulty, as indeed there should be, for an illegal in Ireland to get a PPS number. The MRCI told us that half of them had paid tax. They must have PPS numbers, and I checked up how you get a PPS number, and you need nothing but a valid passport and a utility bill. You don't have to prove legal residency at all.
Okay. And
so they're already paying tax.
Okay, well, what I've asked for is empirical evidence, so it's backed up by research, preferably from a university, that would support your proposition that our state is economically losing out from regularising the position of immigrants. But the final question is, do you believe that the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Irish immigrants who are now living across the world, in the United States and other countries, who are there, who went there illegally, should they all be deported back to Ireland? Do you believe that?
As a single-issue organisation, immigration, legal or illegal, to any other jurisdiction but ours is simply not our business. I think my colleague may want to say something.
I'm asking you for reasons of consistency. You've used international examples to back up your argument. So I'm asking you, if you're using international arguments to back up why we should ask the migrants who've come here to leave, would you not be consistent? Are you calling on Irish migrants throughout the world who have gone to another country illegally to work? Are you calling for them to be deported back to Ireland?
We might be inconsistent if we were a multi-issue organisation, but we are a single-issue organisation. Immigration to this jurisdiction and to this jurisdiction only is our concern. The Americans, in their millions, they concern themselves with the other question, and believe me, millions of them are so concerned.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Kenny.
Apologies, Chairman, I have to leave for another.
Thank you very much. Deputy Kenny, 3 questions, please, through the chair.
Most of the questions I was going to ask have already been asked, so I just confine myself to one question. And I want to ask Ms. Connell and Mr. Neville that, it is a fact that people who are perceived as being illegal immigrants in this country are frequently subjected to abuse and sometimes to physical attacks. And is the use of language like, armadas of immigrants, people who come here and giving 2 fingers to the state, and talking about people from sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, does that language lead to situations where people are either physically attacked or verbally abused?
Okay, Ms. Nichan or Mr. Neville.
Okay, Deputy Kenny, if I may go first. I can't find how you can possibly object to a term like Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. They're geographical descriptive terms. I mean, we'd have no geography taught in our schools if those terms were banned or deemed to be abusive or leading to abuse. So, okay, I don't think that's a terribly important point. The situation can arise in any jurisdiction where there is not a contrarian opinion expressed in Parliament through elected representatives that seeks to give some representation to the concerns of populations in general in the country as to what is happening all around them. The single biggest change that has happened in Ireland since I was born in 1957 is that 20% of the people now living in the south of Ireland were not born here. That's the real figure. That situation is quite astounding. It was never the policy of any party or platform or Ardèche or annual conference or whatever they're called that any party ever had that they announced, hey, great idea, we're going to change the demographic of Ireland, we're going to, by one means or another, allow 20% foreign populations to live here. Meanwhile, 50,000 young Irish people will leave annually simply to acquire a job, which is what is happening. And Ireland, in a very short period of time, will have a population whole, not maybe entirely dissimilar to Russia post-World War II, where that whole generation of football players and soccer players and young apprentices and skilled people are not here. They're in Australia, they're in America, they're in Canada. Now, I don't think it's a particularly mature situation for a country to turn a blind eye to that just once they're gone on the plane and forget about them. And you have to face hard facts. In a country where we have 350,000 unemployed people or whatever, to continue to import a workforce from other countries, whilst our own people are emigrating and whilst our own people are unemployed and unable to seek gainful employment, or perhaps being forced to work at rates that have been artificially driven down by the influx of people who are quite happy to work for very much less in pay. That is the situation that has not been represented in our Parliament. It then falls to a few people like us, and we are the contrarian opinion, granted, and some people might not like the contrarian opinion. But can I just draw one analogy very briefly, if I may, Mr. Chairman? There's great plaudits and credits and interest being expressed at the moment in the banking inquiry about people who did offer a contrarian opinion. I'm just making a principal point, not an exact comparison. It is now thought that it would have been a good idea, perhaps, if we listened to those contrarian opinions, whether they were liked or not at the time. All I can say to you and all members here, Deputy, is that it would not, perhaps, be an undue indulgence to give us that you would consider our contrarian opinion, that it has basis, and that, as the Deputy who has just left, who very kindly remarked, it is the position held by the majority of Irish people as expressed in various opinion polls. We have stood for election. Unfortunately, Deputy McGrath.
Please answer the chair. Deputy McGrath, you want to come in and give a question, you can, but please no heckling, okay? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Deputy McGrath, I can tell you exactly.
Sorry, no, Deputy McGrath.
He's getting a long run there now. He's getting a long run there. We have got 3 questions each.
You can come back in a minute, as you know, if you wish.
No, I'm next, Chairman.
You are. When you're finished. And he knows that. So please now. A bit of order, please.
I'll finish briefly.
Thank you.
I can finish briefly. Deputy McGrath knows that I was not elected. I went for election, and everybody who goes for election puts their platform before the people. I will say this. Irish elections are held in one particular context. They're held in the context that immigration is not discussed. There's a vow of silence taken by, at the risk of upsetting anybody, every deputy here. You take a vow of silence before every election not to discuss immigration. It's painted up as not discussing racism. What is...
Sorry.
No, we don't do sectarianism and racism, yeah?
Please, can we have
yeah, we don't
please?
do those
No. One voice,
I would like to
Because
what are you saying? I would like him to withdraw that. I had to withdraw a statement earlier on. He can withdraw that. Where is the proof of that? Where is the proof that I have
come in a moment.
that I have signed, that any member here has signed a pledge? That's absolutely ridiculous.
You can come in a moment.
It is ridiculous.
And you can ask a question if you wish, but order now, please. From everybody.
Go on.
From everybody. Thank you. Please continue.
In your moment.
Sorry.
To finish to Deputy McGrath's legitimate question, I was making the point.
It's actually short.
Deputy,
It was my question, actually, to the Chair, which hasn't been answered at all.
Please.
That's the reason why we're getting upset.
Sorry, Deputy, can you ask the question?
I'll answer the interruption if that's what it was.
No,
but look,
no interruptions. That will only encourage more interruptions.
But I would... I could... Okay, well,
He asked the question and he has the floor.
yes.
The question, Deputy Kenny.
I got no answer. You didn't answer the question I asked you about the fact that people are being physically attacked and racially abused.
I did.
Because of the use of the kind of language that were used by you, and you haven't addressed that in your answer whatsoever.
I did address, but perhaps not to your entire satisfaction.
You didn't address it at all.
Sorry. Okay. Well, that's the response you're going to get. Deputy Collins, you're next. 3 questions, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I've actually no questions. I just want to make a brief, just give my own brief input. I just want to declare an interest at the outset of what I have to say. The last time I met Miss Ní Connell, she was wearing a sandwich board outside the gates of Dáil Éireann holding a protest about myself, about something I had allegedly said or done, and I can't recall what it was about, just to put that on the record. Just to say, I don't agree with our two guests here today, anything with which they've said. I think they're so far out of touch with Irish society and with Irish thinking that it's beyond me, really, and I suppose words can't really explain. I can't put into words how far removed they are from any bit of normal thinking that's out there in society at the moment. And following on from discussions that I had with the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland and their presentation here today, I launched a bill which is in the lottery for a Friday sitting, which is an earned regularisation bill for undocumented people here in Ireland. And I think there's broad agreement across all the parties in relation to the principles in it. There might be difference in relation to some of the minutiae of how it would be rolled out, but I think regularising undocumented people in this country would be hugely beneficial, and many of them have put down roots here. The vast majority of them, up to 90%, are contributing positively to society. And it is a fact that 2/3 of them are working in the shadow economy, and by regularising them, you would bring them into, you would, as it says, regularise them. You wouldn't be allowing some employers who are preying on them as vulnerable people to use them to suppress official wage rates. So for all the reasons that were stated by the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland, I mean, you know, it all points as a positive. What are the options? The alternatives are you engage in mass deportations. That's not an option. The other alternative is you do nothing. That's not an option either. I think it's an issue that we should face up to. And it's not an amnesty. It's not fair to say that it's an amnesty. And it's not credible, I think, for people to come in here and make a presentation that you know, they don't have a view on the parallel situation that exists with the undocumented Irish in the United States, to say that they can talk with credibility and present with credibility about the undocumented here in this country and not hold a view or express a view which is the exact same set of circumstances which Irish people are experiencing in the United States. So that's just my...
Ms. Ní Connell, okay, if you want.
The Deputy has mentioned his bill. I'm glad he mentioned it, because I consider it extraordinary that the MRCI, who are the advocates par excellence for regularisation, did not feel that they should go further, in reasonableness apparently, than asking for people to be regularised who had been here 4 years. But the Deputy, in his excess of zeal to rebrand his party, has decided to bring in a bill which says if they are merely here for 2 years, they are to be regularised. May it bring you joy, Deputy. The second matter is, he says you can't do nothing. What do you do? Now, he talked about mass deportations. We've already said that a proportionate level of deportation to the British would have you deporting 3,500 or so in the year. If you deported 3,000 or 4,000 for the next few years, you would soon get up to your 20. But perhaps a more important, but I should say, you will never deport all illegals. You deport as many illegals as you can detect. There isn't a government in the world that will be able to hold up its head and say there isn't an illegal on our territory. As regards to what we do, this is very important. What do you do about illegal immigration? An illegal immigrant cannot live in fresh air, as we are all agreeing. They are mostly in jobs. That means somebody is employing an illegal. That is an offence according to our work permit law, but one never hears of anybody being charged with hiring an illegal that I'm aware of. Now, we made a suggestion to the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, which has not been taken up. And it was that they would mirror an action taken by Minister Burton, which is apparently has been a successful thing. On the Social Welfare Department website, there is a facility to report people that you suspect are engaged in social welfare fraud, and it can be done anonymously, and it has been a successful operation, I understand. We suggested to the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation that they would put on their site a similar facility to report people suspected of working illegally, because that would be an enormous help, because detection is, it takes time and resource and manpower, and this would be a great help to that. I should perhaps also mention, if I can, that there is a problem with the National Employment Rights Authority, and when I say that, I mean the grip.
I have to actually, with regret, intervene. We deal with justice issues, not with employment issues and that kind of stuff. That's a separate committee.
Okay.
So I've got to be careful I don't move in there, because I'll get. So if we can stick with the justice side of it, please.
Okay.
Moment, yeah.
I think that's as much as I have to say to Deputy.
Senator Sapone, you have 3 questions.
Thank you. I really just have one. Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask you if... Through the Chair. Thank you. If either of you think that there is any reason, humanitarian, ethical or otherwise, for the Irish state to regularize even one undocumented migrant. Let's say, for example, as we know, there are many who have come through Ireland in relation to human trafficking as a result of, and have been engaged, in order to get engaged in prostitution and sexual violence, and we've had a lot of debate and discussion in relation to that, or others, even just one undocumented migrant. Is there any reason for the state to regularize one undocumented migrant, let's say according to a strict process of steps? Or are you saying to us that in every case of an undocumented migrant, that the state, if it can detect them, ought to deport them?
Mr. Hunnell.
Well, we have already indicated in our opening statement that there are people who are technically illegal immigrants who have fallen out through no fault of their own. We said where perhaps their employers had assured them that they had the work permit or had renewed it and had not. And there is a scheme, and we clearly said that we did not object to that scheme. It's in paragraph 8, Senator. It is also the case, and has been said by ministers in the Dáil when they have replied to suggestions for regularisation, they have said, we don't seem to have copied that part, that any illegal immigrant may approach the authorities and ask if they feel they have very special circumstances for their case to be considered, and they may get such consideration, or they may find that they are deported. That has been said in the Dáil quite frequently. I'm very interested in the Senator's reference to trafficking, because and I have heard an expert years ago on the 6 o'clock news after a conference on the matter, I think, and anyway, common sense will tell you, heard her admit, there's a great confusion about trafficking. Almost everybody who is eventually considered as trafficked began as somebody who had themselves knowingly smuggled. They did not know the terrible things that were to ensue, and then it becomes trafficking. If they are on your territory, it is imperative. Trafficking is really enslavement. If people are on your territory and are in a trafficked situation, it is your absolute duty to remove them from that enslavement, that situation they have found themselves in that they did not expect to be in. But once they are removed from their enslaver, and hopefully that enslaver severely punished, they revert to being no longer the victim that you are when you're trafficked, but they revert to being the perpetrator that everyone who has had themselves smuggled is. So you rescue them from their enslaver, but they are now back to where they were, an illegal immigrant, and yes, it is proper to deport them.
Senator Sapone, further question?
Well, I've heard you express your opinion there, which I would have to disagree with through the Chair. Just going back to in relation to human trafficking, and it deeply disturbs me to hear you say that, but so in relation to my question, though, that I put to you, is it then, perhaps then the scale of the number of people who might possibly move through a regularization process that you're objecting to, as distinct from I suppose, the possibility that some people, whether it's through the one or two schemes that you've identified, actually undocumented migrants, that your view is that there are examples of when that is acceptable as undocumented migrants, a couple of the ways in which the state has put forward for them to remain.
Ms. Nicola.
If I
Scale that you're objecting to.
Actually, no. Actually, no. Because of what we how I would view illegal immigration, because it is an abuse of Irish citizens. It is an offence, as far as I'm offensive to me, to think that you would say to an illegal immigrant, yes, you may stay, except under the very special circumstances that I have talked about. For those I said who fell into illegality through no fault of their own, and there could be, I have also said, there can always be very, very special circumstances, and as I said, ministers have said in their response to any suggestion of regularisation, they have said in the Dáil, I have read it in the reports of the Dáil, if somebody thinks they have a very special case, some compelling reason that although they're illegal, they should not be deported, they are it is open to them to approach the authorities and put that special case. But if there is no special case, of course they should be removed.
And final question, Deputy Senator.
Thank you.
Deputy O'Dowd, you have 3 questions, please.
Yeah, I just want to say that I come from family, particularly members of my own family, went to America as immigrants and have fought for people who are there illegally, and I stress that I support that the principle, that the arguments that the Irish government make in Washington should be the same arguments that we should articulate here about our illegal immigrants, and I think there should be an equality of our ideas, and I think that what's missing from what I've heard is the humanitarian aspect of people who are driven for economic reasons to cross borders all over the world to look for work in many cases. And my question is simple, really. Part of the process here in Ireland is very slow in terms of the rights that people have to challenge their deportation order, and I'm faced weekly with people who are challenging those rights in the courts, and the problem is that many of them would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 years in process. In other words, that due to our own legal system, a decision is delayed for a significant number of years, and their children in many cases have gone through primary schools, are valued and very important members of the community of children in the local national school, are people who are wanted on the local football team, on the local soccer team, on the local volleyball team. And would your humanitarian views look at cases like that? Do you see it as an issue that people would have a valid reason because of delay in the processing of their applications, and the fact that the whole community in which they live want them to be part of that community? Would they be part of your amnesty that you would think about?
I think my colleague is interested.
Deputy O'Dowd, if I may answer. An interesting situation you raise. There is undoubtedly a huge inefficiency and a protracted process in people pursuing cases in Ireland, and we do hear regularly, and it's well publicised, of asylum seekers who are many, many years in the system. Now, it has to be said, and it rarely is said, that the facts of the situation are this. The first 2 stages of the process under which an asylum seeker seeks to remain in the country is he or she makes an application for asylum, and if and on foot of the result of that application for asylum, he or she may then make an appeal. Now, it is little known, and it should be better known and put into context, that the average time for processing the initial application is of the order of 18 or 19 weeks. And the average time for the processing of the appeal, the second stage, is something of the order 13 to 16 weeks, of that order. Cumulatively, no more than 6 months, the first 2 stages, by which stage every asylum seeker has got an answer. They have their answer from the state as to the legitimacy of their asylum application at that stage. Now, it is often portrayed that people are languishing in Mosney or Hatch House or wherever for 11 years and no answer. They have their answer. They just didn't like the answer. So be it. It's the state's duty to come up with its answer. Now, having got their answer, it's not as if they're without a clarification of the position that they've made. It is incredibly inefficient the remainder of the system as to how long it takes for people to actually be finally processed, by which stage, as you say, they have children, families, they're part of a community, and therefore there is a drag whereby the local community feels that they should all stay. The state should be far more efficient in processing the stages subsequent to the first 2 stages, which it is now doing quite efficiently within 6 months. After that, we really have to get the legal system moving in this country and get those people their answer quickly. If it is a yes, they stay. If it is a no, they go. But at the moment, it is a useful system to play out, and Sean Aylward, the former Secretary-General of the Department of Justice, says that in relation to asylum seekers and the processing and appeals which they will make, he says they will fight you up to the steps of the airplane. Now, why wouldn't they? They want to stay here, but they do that, and they have succeeded in doing that for extremely prolonged periods at great cost to the state. And it's rarely mentioned how great the cost of the state is. In any Dáil term, €1.5 billion supports the asylum operation, the whole lot. It is extremely expensive. It should be far more efficient and streamlined. And if people get their answer, they should take their answer, and the country should, in conscience and as a duty to the citizens, enforce the answer.
Is, in fact, notwithstanding whatever criticism you make of the argument, would you deport? Are you arguing that those people ought to be deported at the end of that process, or do you not see that if you can regularise the position as regards all of those people, that at least you would recognise the humanity of the families concerned, of their commitment to the community that they're in, of their children? This is an issue that comes to my door, that if and when they can't go to 3rd level because they cannot pay the actual huge fees because they're not deemed to be citizens of the state or of the European Union, and that you're going to cast those families into perdition, basically, that you would drive them from the state, and we would argue, and I would strongly argue, that we would regularise their position, and whatever adjustments need to be made legally in the future for new people coming in, I think we have to make the case that those people are entitled to stay here, that they've done their time, that they have made, and they make valuable commitments and contributions to our society, and the people want them here, which is very important as well.
Okay, who wants to take that? Mr. McDonald, you have your hand up first.
Children have been mentioned. They are used like battering rams in this process. When these families are deported, as they should be, I would suggest that the children in question should wave goodbye to Ireland with great gratitude and say, we have received X years of free education in this country, although we had no right to be here. We also have, although we had no right to be in the country, gained a high level of English language, which gives us an advantage in the globalised jobs market. Ireland, at the expense of the taxpayers, in spite of our illegality, has been very good to us. We thank you as we leave. That is my answer to the Deputy.
Thank you. And finally, I think Deputy McGrath, you wanted to come in, and you wanted to come in as well with a question.
I don't know. Some of my colleagues didn't get in because I'll wait until the very end.
You know, there's
You're happy enough, yeah?
Yeah, and there's Deputy Ferris wants to come in a second time.
Sorry?
Okay.
You don't want to hear what I have to say.
But I don't want to exclude anybody now.
No, you're not excluding anybody. I want to.
Okay.
I would exclude him, don't worry.
Just in relation to a question earlier on, in relation to Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin said earlier that in relation to the journal.ie, he felt that in response to today's debate, he felt that most of the viewers there would be supporting your position. Now, I personally don't agree with that assessment. I think there would be about 15% of the Irish population that would support your position. That's my view. But I'd like to know, what's your view on the amount of public support you have for your anti-immigration views?
I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier. Every survey and poll that seems to come up, where obviously it always depends on the question put, but if it's a sort of a general question like, do you think we need strict immigration controls? Do you think we might be going too far with immigration? That type of generalised question, it seems to bring up between 60 and 65%. I have many examples of it where people say yes to that.
Could you perhaps
Yes, I could.
Perhaps you would forward some information to the clerk, please, for information.
I'll be happy to do so.
Thank you very much. And sorry, Mr. Neville.
Yeah, might I just come back in, because I think we were having this interchange earlier when other deputies were seeking to get in. The level of support that is there amongst the general population for a greater degree of control on mass immigration is quite significant. The deputy is right. We didn't get elected when we went before the public on that issue. Irish general elections tend to veer off on many other things, and certain issues get left behind. Now, I was making the point to the Irish of several deputies that at election times you do not discuss immigration. In the context where something is not discussed and there is left a void, it is very difficult for people who wish to debate the issue to have an airing in a forum. The media quite compliantly and generously follow your lead and will not bring up immigration as a big issue, and therefore it doesn't get discussed. I would quote one particular poll that would give some indication from a source that might be surprising as to what the level of support for the general position we hold would be. In October 2009, the Irish Times conducted a poll, and they asked people what their views were on immigration. And 72% of people said there is either too much immigration or far too much immigration into Ireland. This was an Irish Times poll in October 2009. Now, that didn't get a long, ongoing discussion in the columns of the Irish Times, but that was the result, and they were fair enough to publish it. Now, why does that not get translated into an election result? That is a question, and I have to say, deputies, there is quite legitimately a pact put before you all, and will be done again next year, that you are anti-racism. And you are, and we are, and that's quite fine, and we would have no problem with that. There's no racists here. The problem is, it is used, unfortunately, to encompass valid discussion of immigration. And because nobody wants to get anywhere near the issue of racism, we'll also park immigration and a discussion of same with that. Therefore, there is no discussion at our general elections on the subject of immigration. There's an election happening in our nearest neighbour within the next month. And they're in a similar situation to us. In fact, they probably have had a lesser percentage degree of mass immigration into their country in the last 10 years. Immigration is straight up there as one of the issues to be discussed, and properly, because their public representatives are giving voice to what their constituents are telling them. You may say that you never hear from your constituents about this matter and they don't bring it to your clinics. Okay. I said you may. I said you may. I said you may.
15% about
if deputies find that they're not having people hammering down their door at their clinics talking about this issue as a major issue, I will genuinely say to you, I could walk down the road to my nearest TD and say to him as well, I know he is not going to stand up on his hind feet in Dáil Éireann and face the camera and start talking about my concerns about immigration. It is not mentioned in our national, or to the two houses of Oireachtas. It just is not discussed. You're there for a duty I would envy you. I would love to have been there, and I haven't. And at 2% of the vote, I won't. But you are there, and you are disenfranchising even 15% of the population by not maturely discussing immigration. And by using terms and opinions that we heard earlier from certain members, I don't think that really adds to the situation. That would be my challenge.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't agree that we never discussed immigration. We regularly do. And also there was a number of politicians who I disagree with raised the issue during elections as well to try and get votes. But I won't go back over the history lesson. My final question, Chairman, is in relation to your organisation and group. And it's interesting now that you're talking about politics. Does your group, for example, target constituencies on the issue of immigration by sending out thousands of leaflets into areas, and particular poor sections and poor disadvantaged areas? Is that part of your work? And did you do it in the last 2 years?
Could I say that when we put out leaflets, it could be for, we wouldn't be particularly thinking about areas in the way that the deputy has talked about. The last time we put out leaflets, we put them out in 4, was it specific constituencies, one being the deputy, naming, right, and the reason, thousands.
Well,
as a matter of fact, through the chair,
to be in a poor area.
Deputy McGrath.
Right. Well, now it happened to be in a poor area. It happened to be deputy. The 4 constituencies chosen were because on the December the 17th, 2013, I think, there was a parliamentary question answered by Minister Alan Shatter to 4 deputies, of whom you were one, and it was implicit that you were looking for the regularisation of illegals. We were outraged at this and said your constituents should be made aware of what you were trying to do. And in those constituencies, including your own, we slogged around, including myself, door to door, and outside of various places, and put them out.
Get on.
We were happy.
A number of them rang me.
Sorry, enough.
And they weren't happy.
Deputy.
Those are the ones that will ring you.
Two more supplementary questions. Deputy Ferris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, indeed, Chairman. Chairman, the opening statement refers to the obligation of the state to defend its borders, and it says in the opening statement, dealing with illegal immigration is part of that defence of the borders. So I would just like to ask the witnesses what sort of defences they would like the state to put in place to defend its borders.
Well, the deportation of illegals when detected, the effort to increase that detection by a stratagem I mentioned, but the chairman said it belongs to another committee. He wasn't happy for me to pursue that too much. Generally, insofar as is possible, not tolerating the presence of illegals. That is what we mean by the defence of the borders.
In other words, sorry, because it wasn't quite clear, because of my reading, I didn't know whether you wanted the army there patrolling the borders or to stop illegals coming in. So it wasn't. So you're just talking about putting stuff up on a website and saying, as you said earlier, asking perhaps a neighbour to complain about their next door neighbour if they know that they're not here legally. You said that that should be up on the website of the Department of Jobs, perhaps on other websites. So you just want people to report on their neighbours, perhaps, or that kind of thing. But it's not. You're not talking then about the army or the police force or something like that patrolling the borders.
Well, firstly, what you're talking about the website was not the only strategy. We talked about the importance of charging people, employers who hire illegals. The fear of God should be the frighteners should be put on employers of illegals. It isn't happening, and it is absolutely central to this defence of your borders by dealing with illegal immigrants, and of course the deportation when detected. But when we talk about defending your borders, we mean of course not letting people in that you don't want to allow in, and we also mean.
Sorry.
But if I could just finish that sentence first, not allowing those in that you do not want to come in, and secondly, if you detect illegals, deporting them. But how do you stop them? They are stopped by immigration officials every day. I haven't got the figures here, but a much higher number of people are what they call denied the right to land, are higher than the number of deportations that we mentioned there. That's done at borders all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you see, the thing is that the immigration officers at the airports and at the ports and that, if you're saying that they're stopping people every day coming in, clearly they're not stopping everybody, because we have a lot of, illegal. But I am glad to hear that you don't want the army or some kind of a national police force or something like that out there patrolling the borders. Because reading from your opening statement, it's not quite clear as to exactly what you would be happy, with to have the dogs out next to people in jackboots.
I just want to clarify through the chair for the record that in Fine Gael there is no pact that we would not discuss this situation at an election time, as has been said, and I just want that on the record, because I would never sign up to anything like that, because that's an outrageous thing for anyone to have said. There is no pact within Fine Gael, and I speak for Fine Gael. There's no pact at election time not to speak about it. And just not to let my manners go by, I want to thank you for coming in, because I didn't thank you initially, and I want to thank you for making my mind up for me completely, not that I needed you to do it, but I completely support the MRCI after what I've heard today and after the tone of your opening statement. I completely support them, and you've just made it more firm for me, and thank you for that.
Okay. Could I just ask 2 questions finally myself, if I may? In the first paragraph you speak about, you put up the image of an armada of boats heading across the Mediterranean. Why do you think this armada of boats, which is a reality we know, is coming across the Mediterranean at the moment?
It's nice to hear you acknowledge that it is a reality. It is now. It has been said that some of the increase in this is due to the appalling Syrian situation. Some is, but I frequently, when I see some of these on television, it is not Syrians. It is obviously people from southern Africa. Apparently, firstly, there is a constant migratory pressure on Europe, but among the reasons is apparently that since Gaddafi's fall in Libya, it has been utterly chaotic, and the Libyans were actually, apparently in cooperation with Europe, in preventing boats leaving for Europe to a degree, and that has completely collapsed now. People come from much further south up into Libya to cross, and they were previously prevented and they no longer are. It has become massively greater.
And just your views on, and I may have my figures incorrect here now, but I understand that there were tens of thousands of people have drowned in the Mediterranean last year and the year before in attempting to get across to Europe. And could I put it to you that the desperation of these people must be absolutely enormous to face such terrible hazards to try and get to Europe, and they must be leaving something absolutely dreadful at the other side.
Put your finger on the nub of the problem, and the nub of the problem with illegal immigration is that the determination of people to get to Europe is boundless, and the determination of European governments to prevent them from doing so is terribly weak.
Yeah, again, the choice seems to be that when you have people who are so desperate that they leave in coffin ships, and I don't want to be emotive on this, that may have a little chance of surviving the Mediterranean. Many thousands have actually perished. Many thousands have been saved from death by the Italian Navy and others as well. Are you suggesting that maybe these rescue attempts should not happen, as some others have said?
My colleague wishes to come in, but may I say one thing? I can only speak for Immigration Control Platform. I'm not here as an individual, and since that has never been discussed, should those rescue attempts, as you put it, not be made, I can only say the following, and let it sit there. When these rescue attempts are made, what is happening is somebody is invading Europe. And for the first time in history, Europeans are aiding that invasion. The whole understanding of these matters has been turned on its head. So that's all I can say to you. You are looking at people who are invading Europe, and you are looking at people assisting the invasion.
So we're suggesting then that the actual assistance that's given by the European navies to these particular people who are in boats should not happen, and they should be allowed to die.
I have answered that in the sense that I have no permission to speak here about anything other than ICP policy. ICP has never sat down and discussed the matter you have just suggested.
You might do that because the current, and you start off yourself here talking about an armada of boats. And this armada of boats, if I can put it to you with respect, recently, is because of the horrific situation in Syria and across North Africa and further south, where people are driven because of race or religion or otherwise to try and survive with their lives in many instances. And they're heading. Their choice probably would be not to have to leave their homes and homelands at all. But if they don't do so, they may be massacred and slaughtered. They come to the Mediterranean, and a lot of them have died, and more of them have been rescued. And what I'm putting it to you is that you yourself mentioned Armada across the Mediterranean, so you probably did discuss it, I would suggest, when you use those terms. And you liken that to a military attack, which I would suggest again is kind of, I wonder whether or not having a military attack and illegal immigration and putting the two together is a little bit strong, you know. I mean, I would suggest to you that people coming across in boats that may sink at any time, leading to the deaths of maybe many hundreds of people, men, women and children, I don't think it's fair, and maybe you might comment, to liken that to a military attack, which is a different type of armada, something like what happened with the Spanish Armada, which failed, or the Armada in the Second World War, which crossed the English Channel. So could I put it to you that perhaps some of the language you use here may not help you, the actual cause you're presenting?
Well, indeed, we have said the very opposite to what you have suggested, Chairman. I'm looking at the third line of our opening statement, which says, in today's Europe, that defence of the border of the state is no longer against military attack, but against illegal immigration. So we specifically say that they are not the same thing at all. I mean no disrespect when I say to you it is for our organisation to set our own agenda, so we will not be taking direction from the committee as to what we will discuss. I will just perhaps say one thing, and these are very difficult things to have to say. When you mention about the people coming across the zone, and you talk about the desperation, you talk about what they're fleeing, I suppose, although I'm not particularly allowed to ask you a question, one might ask the question, are you therefore saying that there are circumstances which justify invasion? Because I think there isn't a country in the world that would say there are circumstances which justify invasion.
I agree with the word invasion. I don't think it's an invasion as such.
I have to put it so.
Okay, Mr. Neville.
Succinctly, to come back to your question, Mr. Chairman, which is well put and which recognises the reality of the situation, that there is and will continue to be, I think, a relentless and an inexorable migration of populations from continents that are no longer sustainable in an economic sense, such as Africa. There's a huge population growth there, and that is the reason why. Africa cannot sustain its population properly, and there is seen the Valhalla of Europe, the place of refuge. There is also the reality of a limit on how many people Europe can hold and what value and productive input these people can make in a European industrialised situation. People drown at sea. That, you've described a human tragedy. It absolutely is that. The human tragedy is compounded, I think, by the fact that European governments have sent out the signal, look, keep coming, we'll place you on Lampedusa, we'll bring you to Italy, we'll bring you to Germany. They did, the European Parliament, I think, make some suggestion that they would set up camps on the North African coast with the agreement of the governments of Libya, Tunisia, whoever else, whereby they would receive these people on the African continent, try and support them in Africa and try and help them to relocate within Africa. By not having done that, they have made the Mediterranean the fortress, which is the challenge for people to come across. It is dangerous. It is a humanitarian tragedy. It will be inexorable, and it will increase as long as Europe continues to receive people. We have to rescue them out of the sea. There's nobody suggesting we would do otherwise and let them drown. But it will become an inexorable reality. Boats, ships, and drowned people in the Mediterranean, unless Europe states, we can hold so many people, we would prepare to support you in Africa, in your own continent.
All right, that's that. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for your attendance here today and your engagement with the committee on the subject. Thank you very much indeed. Can we go into a private session? We have a number of important matters to discuss.